So we are officially on day number 8 of the dirty trial. Now on day number 7, we heard from a number of witnesses. But the one that really stuck to the jurors was Cassie Ventura's mother, Regina Ventura, who gave an emotional testimony revealing that in 2011, her family paid Diddy $20,000 out of fear for Cassie's safety after he allegedly threatened to release explicit videos of her. Now the threat came after Diddy found out that Cassie was dating rapper Kid Cudi. Regina said the family took out a home equity loan to pay him, describing how sick she felt to her stomach over the situation now. Her testimony supported Cassie's earlier claims that Diddy physically assaulted her and made violent threats, including saying that he would blow up Kid Cudi's car. Regina also told the court that she photographed Cassie Ventura's bruises later that year to document the alleged abuse. Now we also heard the testimony of David James, who is a former assistant to Dirty, and he testified about a series of disturbing events, including guns, drugs, and intimidation. Now he claimed he once saw Sue Knight being handed a gun outside of a diner, prompting Diddy's team to arm themselves and search for Should Now. David said he frequently ran errands for Did, picking up drugs and condoms under strict cash-only rules to avoid leaving a paper trail. Now he described Faye and Cassie unconscious in a hotel room while a naked man fled and said Diddy was in the shower. David also detailed being forced to take a lie detective test, being searched by Dirty, and lying about filing a false police report against Dirty Chef. In another incident, we also heard from a male dancing by the name of Spray Hayes, but he really liked going by the Punisher. He testified about a strange and unsettling encounter with Diddy and Cassie in 2012, and he said he was hired under the impression he'd be performing for a birthday party. But when he arrived at 2 a.m., Cassie was dressed in only a robe and a wig, and she greeted him alone. She instructed him not to speak to her husband and to help create a sexy scene, leaving $800 in the bathroom and asking him to wear underwear or a towel. Now, during the encounter, Cassie rubbed baby oil on herself and asked Hayes to do the same. Later, Diddy showed up wearing a veil, silently directing the interaction while pleasing himself. The scene lasted for about 25 to 45 minutes, and afterwards Cassie asked if Hayes wanted to finish, but he declined, gave him an additional $1,200. For his time now, he frequented hotels with the couple about 12 times, but after one incident of erectile dysfunction, he never received a call back now. We ended the day with testimony from HSI Agent Cannon, and he was just getting into the details of what he found at Diddy Star Island home. We are going to break down now day number 8 and so much more, but before we do, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for notification, so you don't miss out on any news regarding this case and so much more. Now let's get back into it. So before the jury is in, the judge says to Ms. Shapiro, who happens to be one of Diddy's defense attorneys, the defense letter about Dr. Hughes preserves your object. So let's talk about Dr. Hughes for a moment. So on May 20th, yesterday, federal prosecutors responded to concerns raised by Sean Combs's legal team about the upcoming testimony of an expert witness who happens to be Dr. Don Hughes now. The defense objected to some of the topics Dr. Hughes had discussed in her pretrial materials known as 3500 material, fearing she might go beyond what the judge previously approved. However, the government made it clear that they planned to strictly follow the court's ruling and keep her testimony narrowly focused. Judge Subramanian previously ruled that Dr. Hughes could testify about topics like why victims of abuse stay in relationships while they delay reporting abuse, how they cope, and how trauma affects memory. So you kind of see where they're going with this, and Diddy's team is like, why is she here? So the judge continues, what about these texts involving M. Ventura and buying drugs in Boston? Prosecution says, we think it's irrelevant, but if they react it's not hearsay that she was involved setting in on her own. I think that's why Mr. Agnifilo wants it. The judge says, I'll think on it. Prosecution says we are concerned that M. Porter, meaning Kim Porter's death, may be used to build sympathy for Mr. Combs and lead jurors to believe that if he is convicted, his children may. Judge says, I'll think on it as to Mr. Mess Cudi, which we know as Kid Cudi. The defense is concerned about hearsay. That's what the judge says. The prosecution says, Mr. Mess Cudi will not be testifying today. The judge says, did I miss that? Prosecution says we emailed at 10:45 p.m. yesterday. The judge says, please get the witness Mr. Jayan and check on the jury. Welcome back, Mr. Jayan. Now the jury is entering prosecution, says Mr. Jayan. Let's continue with items you seized on Star Island GX 215. What is this? High heels and sex items in the master closet. Okay, and what's this? 3 cell phones found in one of the boots. The prosecution displays the Gucci bag for the jury. Pull up GX10A and the stipulation zoom in on paragraph A. White plastic bottle. It contained liquid residue of meth and liquid MDMA oca, and these pills were found with a Tesla imprint on them. These had the active ingredient in Xan. This $100 bill had residue of cocaine. Mr. Jayan, what's this, a dark wood bow with the word puppy on top? How do you know that this is Astral Glide and baby oil that you seize? How many bottles of each? 31 Astro Glide and 25 bottles of baby oil. Any other cell phones found? Yes. Okay, BX 1301 page 3, paragraph 11. Prosecution says, was a gun found in the suitcase? Yes, A. 45 hold the bullets up for the jury. No. Further questions. Judge says, cross-defense says the day of the search, you knew that Mr. Combs was leaving the country with his twin daughters. Prosecution says, objection sidebar. After the sidebar, Combs's attorney Tini Garago says in planning the search, you knew that none of the targets of the investigation would be there. Objection overrun. Agent Gannon says the plan was to have him not there, but we had contingencies. What type of vehicles did you use? Armor, vehicles, and a boat come in by land and sea. This common practice. 80 or 90 agents, not all at the same time. You found 6 people and kept them in handcuffs for an hour. No, ma'am. There was one individual who wasn't happy with us and wasn't cooperating, so we kept him in handcuffs longer. There's a music studio in the guest house, right? DX 305. Do you recognize this? Yes, ma'am. It's the studio. Garrido says move to admit. So now there is a photo shown of a mixing board, keyboards, the word love and juice script. Overvary, a sketch artist by the name of Elizabeth Williams, provided this picture to Inner City Press, and it's a picture with Diddy with his head in his hand while Agent Gannon is showing the gun. Diddy is currently a lone wolf. He's thinking about all of the celebrities that used to party with him. He's like, you hear me? Y'all can't do me like this. You are big, some bitches. Tierney Gigo says the gun was wrapped around in a towel. It didn't look like how you displayed it to the jury yesterday, right? Yes, ma'am. Did you find any photos of Mr. Combs with these firearms? We did not do. You agree that handguns that are metal are easier to get fingerprints than maybe any other type of device. Can't really say if it's easier, but it can be done. Can you get prints off a gun easier when it's inside? I think so. At HSI you have Mr. Kasa's DNA, right? I don't know, when he got arrested, the government took DNA swabs, right? I don't know, hold up the Gucci bag. The drugs were in the Gucci bag and the puppy box, right? Yes, Your Honor. I'm going to introduce a sealed exhibit with the help of it. May I approach the witness? Yes, we may proceed with DX 304, Prosecutor Smeezer says. Cut off the screens now, no one can see but the witness and the jury. Tini Garrigo says, please don't say the names of any of the people in this photograph other than my client. Don't talk about it. Prosecutor Samir says, can we confer with counsel? Judge says you may. The deputy says we may take the sealed exhibit down. Garrido says, Agent Jayan, you live in Florida. Don't many people have guns in their homes? Right. Objection, says prosecution. Judge says rephrase. Do you have guns in your home? Yes, no. Further questions. Judge says redirect. Prosecution says no. Next, government witness. The government calls Dr. Don Hughes. What is your profession? Clinical and forensic psychology? I treated people who were in World War II, which was such an honor. How many times have you testified in court? 60 or 65 times in SDY, NDY, and the Northern District, also New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Virginia. We offer Dr. Hughes as an expert defense. Says no objection. Prosecution continues. What do you anticipate covering? Why victims stay memory? Have you been retained by the government? Yes. What is your hourly rate? $600, but $6,000 for the day in court. So let me ask you something. Why do victims stay? Well, first, there are psychological bonds and psychological consequences of the abuse. What are the levels of fear? It ranges from physical violence to butterflies. Violence doesn't always have to happen all the time. What a psychological violence, intimidation, throwing things, telling you what you can do and where you can go. Objection, says defense. Hold on, says the judge. I'm going to strike that last answer. Prosecutor Steiner says, what can be the role of sexual abuse? It puts the victim in significant physical fear. Why does it prevent leaving shame duration? They don't want to think about it? What is emotional abuse? Putting down our partner, feeling like a piece of crap. What about financial dependence? The abuser controls housing and transportation, taking away her laptop. Objection, says defense. Sustain? What is the most common coping mechanism? Trying to work it out because of the trauma bond. You don't want to lose your partner. Personal coping mechanism. How does play appeasing work? Dr. Hughes says we're trying to avoid abuse. What is minimization? The victim says, maybe they had a bad day at work, maybe they were intoxicated. It's a way to stay in the relationship, but it increases their risk. It's not a long-term strategy. It gets from one assaulted episode to the next. What about the power relation? A person can have the power as principal of a school. The victim asks, who is going to believe me? When does the victim finally speak? In a safe environment or after psychological help? What type of language do victims usually use? When they first speak of it, they minimize. They are piecemeal. They remember the chipping paint on, the seating, the smell of the alcohol on the perpetrator's breath. Okay, now time for sidebar and then the cross-examination. Now the cross-examination will be done by Jonathan Bach, who was just brought on. Yesterday happens to be Alexandra Shapiro's husband. He is the 10th lawyer added to Combs's defense. Team Bach says, people don't fit into boxes, right? They are categories, but you have to listen to particular individuals, right? I'm not divorced from my training. When you do forensic work, want a lot of sources of information, right? If it's relevant, you look at police reports, witness reports, and the like. Correct, familiar with malingering. I am. People can fabricate emotional responses. Correct, they can. Should I break here? I don't have a good cliffhanger. The judge says let's go on break. But wait. While they're on break, they bring in George Kaplan. Now George Kaplan used to work for Diddy. He ended up quitting after witnessing violence. George wants to invoke his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. The judge says welcome. Prosecution says, did you receive a subpoena? Kaplan says yes. Prosecution says, do you intend not to answer? On the Fifth Amendment ground? Kaplan says yes. Prosecution says, Your Honor, please sign the immunity order. Judge says, has he read it? No, read it first. The attorney says he's read it. I will sign the immunity order. The government will seek to admit GX 698 OCA. So now they're back from break now. Prosecutor says, Your Honor, we emailed you. The exhibit over the break. Niflo says we object to it as hearsay. The statement. Thanks. I feel you from Mr. Combs is ambiguous. He could be saying thanks for the advice. The judge says we'll pick back up on it after Dr. Hughes. Please get her back on the stand. Now the witness is entering and the jury is entering. CASA's attorney Box says, you are with the American Psychological Association, which says you should only render an opinion after an examination. Right, where does it say that this is a different role? You have not gathered information about this case. Right, I am not rendering an opinion on any individual, so there's someone by the name of Cassie, but you don't know what she said. Right? I don't. You testified across the river in Eastern District. New York, right, and you say the same thing. Even those cases are different. Correct. It's up to help the jurors understand, but it's their job to consider their case. Right? You don't publish data on the patients you have evaluated. Do you? It's confidential, so I can't cross-check your experience, the basis of what you are saying. Right? People might go to a civil lawyer to make a little money. Right? Objection. The judge says, let's move on in civil litigation. You might look for malingering. Right? You gave a webinar about giving expert witness testimony. Right? Yes, for battered women, let me show you DX, judge says. Sidebar. During the sidebar exhibit from Star Island. Raid. Baby oil and astrolite, the judge says jurors were going to send you to the jury room for a bit. All rise. The jury leaves. The judge says, yesterday, Miss Shapiro submitted an exhibits party now reviewing a document. What should I focus on? Prosecution says it shouldn't show this witness has a bias. Judge said. Romanmanian says she can be shown the document about training domestic violence advocates and ask if she remembers it. But I won't admit it as evidence until she denied it and it becomes prior and consistent statement. Now the jury comes back in and Bach says, does this document refresh your recollection? Let me look at it more closely. Yes, the fourth part is about navigation cross-examination. Right, yes. Most of your income comes from court-related work. Right, no, maybe half. You've raised your rate to 600. It's been the same for some time, but you raised it commensurate with others. You've been retained 100 of times, but you never come into court and testify in defense of a man accused of a sex crime. That's correct. I don't evaluate offenders. You've met with prosecutors 6 times to prepare your testimony. Right, correct. Can we have a sidebar, says prosecution. You may, says the judge. So let me give you a little backstory on why they may be asking these types of questions. So in 2015, Dr. Don Hughes advised advocates for battered women on how to give expert testimony. Ba is saying that this is relevant because it shows Hughes's involvement in a cottage industry of psychologists who provide court testimony for payment with experts. It's very dangerous because they may come in with an aura of authority, he said. Now getting back to the line of questioning, the defense asked, did you discuss the topics with the prosecutors with all due respect? It was mostly me educating them, but you know nothing about the case. Were you advising them on how to present evidence in domestic violence cases? Didn't you help them write? Their brief prosecutor said, can we have a sidebar? The judge says yes, but I'll keep it brief, shorter than the last. So it looks as though Dr. Hughes may have stepped outside the bounds of her role as an expert witness by potentially helping to craft arguments for the prosecution, and if that's the case, it could damage her credibility with the jury and make her appear more like a member of the prosecutor team than a neutral expert. Sensing this risk, the prosecution quickly requested a sidebar to shut down the perception before it gained traction. So this moment is all about perception to the jury, and if they start to believe that she's involved in drafting legal documents, they may no longer view her as a neutral party. Even if she's being completely honest, it may make her seem biased, which is what Diddy's team was trying to say in the beginning. Before she even got up on the stand, the judge comes back and he says, sorry, that sidebar wasn't shorter. Steiner. Now Steiner happens to be with the prosecution and she says to Dr. Hughes, you reviewed some filings to the court in this case was all related to the subject of your expert testimony. Right, correct. In fact, we redacted you. Did you are a board-certified forensic psychologist? Right, yes. How many of those are there in New York State? I think about 40 recroll, said judge. So now the defense Jonathan Bach is back and he says your defense work is almost entirely for victims of domestic violence. Right? I am not sure that is true. You worked with Mr. Brian Steele, who was defending a woman charged with reacting to domestic violence. Right, yes. Now while have to recall Brian Steele is the hood attorney that worked with Young Thug and won his case. He's now on Diddy's case. The defense continued saying, and Mr. Steele decided not to use you. After meeting with you, the judge says, move on. Ba says no further questions. The judge says next witness, the government calls George Kaplan. Before we get into George Kaplan, let me first say prosecution. Don't bring nobody else with the first name Don. Back on that stand, we've messed up with Don Richard. Now you've dug an even deeper grave with Dr. Don Hughes. Leave the Dons alone. Okay, we have Kaplan on the stand and the prosecution asked him, when did you work for Combs Enterprise 2013 to 2015? What fell under that holding company? Clothing, liquor, entertainment. I was executive assistant to the chief operating officer. Where did you work? 1710 Broadway, New York City. What was your next position? Executive assistant to the chairman. Mr. Combs from September 2014 to September 2015. Who did you report to Ms. Cum KK? She essentially ran Mr. Combs's life. Where did you report? LA? What did you do? Carried his bags, made sure things were where he wanted them. As he trusted me more, he had me around more. I set up hotel rooms. How many hours of work? Week 80 to 100 hours a week. How much did you get paid? $125,000 a year to start. What did you do in the morning? Make sure everything was in the bathroom. The breakfast was cooked. He was recording a mixtape, so we worked late. Who was security? Uncle Polly. Drock and Ruben later licensed security in the second half of 2015. How frequently did you communicate with Mr. Combs? Multiple times a day? Things could be found in the back and iPad. Drugs. Whatever. Did he threaten you? He threatened my job. How often? Maybe monthly. He'd say he's only to be surrounded by the best people and that he wasn't. For example, he asked me to get a gallon of water in a BPA-free bottle, and I was unable to find any at Whole Food. So instead I brought him back 2.5 gallons of water in a BPA-free bottle, and he told me. No. How did you travel on his jet or going in advance to make sure that everything was all set up? How did you set up his hotel rooms? There was a bag. I unpacked it. Clothes, candles, astrolide, baby oil. Who brought this? Often me in? What cities? Did you set up hotel rooms? New York and Miami. In LA it was the Mr. C, Bel Air and Intercontinental. Okay, in New York. Trump by Columbus Circle. In Miami, the SLS. How was it booked? Frank Black based on Biggie's Frank White. Would you clean up rooms? Yes. Bottles of baby oil? Gatorade. Once. Brown crystallized powder on the counter of the bathroom sink. Why did you clean up? Not hotel staff. It was implied. Protect his public image. I was keen on doing that. Explain. Agnello says. Objection overrun. I found hotels would sell photos to newspapers to shame guests. Did he reach out to you from the room for food, clothes, sometimes drugs? I did it. What drugs do? Kit. Illegal drugs. Agnello says I object to the termigal. What are the drugs? Advil, ketamine. What does he ask for? He asked that I pick up the drugs for him. MDA. Who asked? Mr. Combs. In LA. In Miami. Mr. Combs asked me to call a person. He came and gave me a bag of pills. MDMA. I gave him cash. I gave the pills to Mr. Combs, and in LA I went out and met a person in Hollywood and gave money. He gave me a bag. The judge says we will break for the day. The alleged expert witness was a complete fumble today for the prosecution. Hopefully they can pick it back up tomorrow when they meet with Mr. Miss Cuddy aka Kid Cudi, although the defense does not see him being very credible because they feel like much of his testimony will be hearsay. But we'll see how that all works out on tomorrow. Now I did come across this page and I'm going to put the creator's name at the bottom of the video. But a lot of people are asking why do they talk about the drugs and the Frank Black so much? She kind of tied it all in, or at least I thought she did. You guys tell me what you think. Let's listen to this. Do you remember when Diddy started shaking his head last week during Cassie's testimony, and it wasn't when she was talking about the super embarrassing things. It was when she was talking about his aliases of Frank Black and Frank White, so she put those names on the record as names that Diddy used. It seemed weird to me that he would get upset about that, but I thought maybe he's just a narcissist and now people are going to realize who he was and what he was doing this whole time. But no, y'all, it gets way deeper than that. They released the photos of the evidence from the hotel room that he was staying in when they arrested him, and in his evidence. In the evidence was a prescription bottle for Clonzip, PA, which is a schedule for narcotic. It's kind of like Xanax but not as strong, and it was written to who? Frank Black, and you'll get this. The address on the label was for Lifespan Medicine in Santa Monica, California. Lifespan Medicine is a concierge doctor kind of thing, so you have someone 24/7. You can call for anything you need, which seems something very much like he would have right. So I'm assuming this is just my opinion that a doctor at Lifespan Medicine wrote this prescription for Dirty, but put it in the name of Frank Black, which is highly illegal. You can't write narcotics to someone in someone else's name, and you definitely can't put your address down as theirs. If the jury believes that Dirty used aliases to get drugs and to cover his track, it plays right into the racketeering charges. So when Cassie casually dropped those names last week, she didn't just out him. She gave the prosecution the string they needed to unravel this whole thing. Diddy shaking his head wasn't just animal. That was panic. You guys, as they say over at Lifespan Medicine, you only have one life, make the most of it. This case is unraveling like a movie script. Follow me for all the breakdowns, all facts, no fluff, just follow me. I'll keep you updated. So I need to clear some things up because a lot of people are missing the point here. So yesterday I made a video talking about how when Diddy was bested, he was found to have a pill bottle in his possession. That was a prescription for Anapin, or the generic for Cunithin, which is a schedule for controlled substance. That prescription was not written to Sean Combs or Diddy or whatever he wants to go by. It was written to Frank Black, which, according to Cassie's testimony from last week, is an alias that Diddy typically used. It's very illegal to write a prescription to an alias. Even worse, under his name on the prescription is an address, and that's typically the person the patient's address, right? So, on this was the address for a concierge doctor in Santa Monica, California, called Lifespan Medicine. So most people get this. Most people understand that this is highly illegal and not okay, not acceptable in any way. But I would say about 25% of my comments are people saying that all celebrities do this. They all use an alias when they get their prescriptions because it protects their privacy. And yada yada yada, that's not true. And if you don't know this by now, let me inform you, just because a lot of rich people do something does not make it. Okay, so, Title 21 of the U.S. Code. Section 840th 83 says, "It is unlawful to acquire or obtain possession of a controlled substance by misrepresentation, fraud, forgery, deception, or subterfuge." I had to look that word up because I've never heard of it before. And that means deceit used in order to achieve one's goals. Now, I don't know how you would describe getting a prescription in a name that is not your own, but I would say that's definitely fraud. Misrepresentation, subterfuge, all of those things, right? So it is highly illegal. You can't do it, and just because celebrities do, it doesn't mean it's okay. There's also the Controlled Substances Act, which says the same thing, like you have to have the full name, the date of birth, the address, and the correct phone number of the person that you're writing a prescription to. When you go to fill this prescription, if it's a controlled substance, you're supposed to have to show your ID to get it filled. I don't know why this seems so wild for some people, but this is a big deal, and it is highly illegal. I don't understand why you don't get it. If you don't get it, let me know in the comments, and I will try my best to help you understand this. Okay, so I've had a ton of people comment on my video from yesterday, and they're saying, who cares? What pills did he took? It doesn't matter. He's not on trial for being a drug addict. We all know that he took pills. Blah, 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 it doesn't matter. And while everyone's right, he's not on trial for being a drug addict. You're missing the big point here. The big picture is this all feeds into RICO. All the testimonies that we've heard so far are part of RICO. They're all building this picture. This grand picture of what a criminal enterprise he was running, right, which RICO stands for. Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization. This was established in the 1970s to help take down like the mobs and mafias. Recognizable requires proof of at least 2 predicate racketeering AGS within the last 10 years while in or controlling a criminal enterprise like Bad Boys. So how does this alias prescription fit into all this? Let me tell you. So, this would set up a pattern of illegal activities, which would be the predicate acts that are required for RICO. So, if we could prove that Diddy in fact did have this prescription written to him by a doctor, and they wrote it in the wrong name, then that would show one prescription fraud, which is a huge deal regardless of what everyone in my comments thinks. It's a big deal. It's a federal crime, it's a felony, and up to 5 years for your first time. And if he was getting something like Klonopin written to him, I can only imagine what other prescriptions he was having written to Frank Black and that he was getting filled himself. There's conspiracy to obtain controlled substances, which is also a felon and identity or healthcare fraud. They could also use this to show that he had enterprise control and structure by saying that he controlled the doctors by having them commit the illegal acts and then staff by having them conceal the illegal acts. They could show that he used an alias to avoid detection that would show deliberate organization and structure, which are key components of RICO enterprise. This could also show concealment of like broader activity if they could prove that any of these drugs were used or given to Classy or other victims or associates of his, and then that they were used like Cassie said they were to control her and get her to do these freak-offs. Then now we're into sex trafficking, so do you see how we worked our way down from fraudulent prescription written to alias all the way to sex trafficking? And it doesn't have to be sex trafficking. It can be any of the things along the way that we just discussed. But that's where everyone's mind goes automatically and they want to get back to that, which I understand. That's the juicy gossip part of it. But it's all of these little things on top of each other, which makes a RICO act.